On behalf of Purina, I want to discuss two specialized diets from Purina, the Pro Plan Veterinary Diet EN and EN Fiber Balance. The EN formula is designed for general gastrointestinal support, featuring a balanced blend of soluble and insoluble fibers to promote healthy digestion and manage GI sensitivities. It's ideal for dogs experiencing gastrointestinal disturbances such as vomiting and diarrhea, pancreatitis, gastritis and enteritis, and inflammatory bowel disease. On the other hand, EN Fiber Balance takes it a step further with an enhanced fiber content specifically aimed at improving the microbiome. This formulation is particularly beneficial for dogs suffering from fiber-responsive colitis, large bowel diarrhea, constipation, and diabetes. Both diets are crucial in managing GI health. To learn more, please visit www.proplanvet.com. Welcome aboard. You're listening to Flight Plan Quick Consults, your go-to podcast for veterinary insights that are fast, focused, and designed to elevate your practice. I'm your host, Brenda Tassava Medina from Encore Veterinary Consulting. Whether you're between appointments or heading into a strategy session, we've got takeoff ready tips, tools, and takeaways to keep your team soaring. So buckle up as we set a course today for mentorship is not training. Today's panel includes Dr. Tim Loonam, Dr. Dani Rabwin, and Melissa Mauldin. Melissa, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I am the VP of HR at Encore Vet Group, and I have a background as working as a practice manager, multi-site leadership, and most recently became a certified executive coach through the International Coaching Federation.
Thank you, Melissa, for being here today.
Thank you.
Next up is Dani Rabwin. Dani.
Hi, thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm a veterinarian and I've been in practice for over 20 years. I'm a small animal general practice doctor. And a few years ago, I found myself as the formal mentor for a new grad. And through a series of events, it spawned an idea. And I launched Ready Vet Go, which is a mentorship program for new and early career veterinarians where I support new grads, early career doctors, and the clinics who have brought them on and welcomed them into their practice. We fill in the gaps that the clinics don't really have all of the time or bandwidth or resources to provide. We have a community for new and early career veterinarians, and it's just sparked some renewed joy in my profession after over 20 years. So happy to be here.
And much needed service as well. So thanks for bringing that to us today.
You're
And
welcome.
then someone who spends a lot of time mentoring and doing surgical training these days with new grads, Dr. Tim Loonam.
Thanks, Brenda. It's great to see all of you again. Dani, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've admired your program for a while. I'm the Chief Veterinary Officer and Director of University Relations for the Encore Vet Group. Been practicing for coming up on 30 years this year, and I am a former practice owner, mixed animal practice owner, and I partnered my practice with the Encore Vet Group in 2019. I've been involved with students since the year I graduated. I was lucky. I come from a background in the Army Veterinary Corps. I'm a prior Army officer. The Army sent me through veterinary school, and I've been working with students, classmates, and students that were a year behind me at the University of Georgia as soon as I graduated. And I was trying to count up how many students I've had, and I literally have lost count. So I'm proud of that. As Brenda mentioned, we've been doing a really exciting program working with new graduates and students through our externship program and a relationship we have with the spay neuter clinic. So lots of clinical hands-on training and trying to do the best I can to make every one of these students cry in a good way. So,
And we're sure that you're very effective there. All right. So digging into our topic, which is mentorship is not training. I think it's one of those things where we just kind of lump it all together. Onboarding, training, hiring, mentoring, and there's so much more nuance that goes into mentoring. So I'd like to start by hearing from each one of you and your special points of view. What's the difference between training someone and then truly mentoring them? Let's start with Melissa.
That's such a great question. And it really is common to use coaching, mentoring, and training to serve the same purpose. We hear that a lot and we say, oh, I'm mentoring them. When all three of those things serve a purpose, but they are different, they are unique. Training really is focused on teaching a specific skill set, a specific thing, onboarding. This is how you're going to do your job. This is how you're going to enter an appointment in the computer. Here's our workflow at our office. It's really like that dedicated time frame to spend learning how to do a skill. So when I'm training somebody, I'm teaching them a skill. When I'm mentoring them, I'm helping them build a relationship. So it's more than teaching them the skill. I'm building a relationship with them. I'm investing in their future and their growth. And I'm imparting wisdom to them, which is another difference, not just knowledge, but wisdom that only comes through years of experience in doing the job. So it's an extra level of it's taking training to that next level and really investing personally into someone.
Thank you for that, Melissa. Dani, what's your take on the difference between training and mentorship?
I think Melissa nailed it with the distinction. And I think the trap that we fall into as veterinary professionals is the training trap. I think it's much easier for many of us in our roles to fall into a training role. That comes naturally to a lot of us. You know, we know a skill. We have maybe somebody who's new on the team and we want to teach them how to do the skill. And really, that isn't what mentorship is. And I hear from new grads all the time who are struggling in maybe a first job who are saying mentorship was provided, but I'm not getting it. Instead, what they're getting really is a clinical skills checklist. And then the clinic thinks I'm providing mentorship. And I think that's a real disconnect that we have because it doesn't include all of the other things that Melissa was talking about. Wisdom, you know, supporting the whole human, thinking about their professional development, personal and career development. It's also, you know, mentorship is collaborative and teaching isn't necessarily a collaborative experience. So, you know, I think Melissa really nailed it. And I do think that that is the trap that I do see a lot of clinics fall into. It just comes more naturally to us and we don't necessarily have a clear understanding of how to provide the wisdom, the support, all of those things outside of a clinical skills checklist. And that's why I love that mentorship is such a hot topic right now, because we can really talk about it and we can talk about these things that are missing. Because when new grads leave their first job, as they are doing in a very, very high percentage, they're saying, I'm leaving because I am not getting mentorship. And yet when you talk to the practice, they're saying, but I'm providing it. And so there's this mismatch. And I think it usually falls into this distinction between training, teaching, and mentorship.
That is a really fascinating approach to it. I think that we're all seeing that happen pretty frequently, and we're hearing it when we're talking to graduates who have been with a practice for about a year, and then they're starting to look somewhere, and it's like, wait a minute, you know, what went wrong? What happened? So, Tim, tell me, you know, you work with students and new grads to teach them, train, you know, surgical skills, other things. But how do you switch back and forth between that training and mentoring role as somebody who is a leader in your practice?
You know, Danny and Melissa summed it up perfectly. And I would add just to put the cherry on top, you know, this mentoring thing is a mutually beneficial relationship. Like Danny pointed out, training checklists. I'm going to train this new graduate to do, you know, these 5 or 6 tasks, and then they can go on and make my practice better. When in fact, what we got to do is this: we got to take care of that whole person, you know, personal, clinical, and career development in the individual. And it is hard to do training. Like you said, I get it. Just this past week, I had 2 students. They're rising third-year veterinary students. Neither have had been through any type of surgical training in their curriculum yet. And so I was teaching them how to do spays and neuters at this shelter. So it would have been very easy to give them a checklist, you know, make this cut, do this, do that. I had them learn those things on their own, plenty of YouTube videos, plenty of textbooks about that. And then when they got into the to the surgery suite, it was my opportunity to stand back and watch them do this, give them that safety net. You know, I have a saying, it comes from my time in the Rangers, you know, we call it ETS, embrace the suck. And the students are really uncomfortable. They've never done something like this before. And I tell them, well, you won't be able to say that tomorrow. But I'm forcing them to use these skills and things that they've learned so far in school, make decisions on their own, develop that confidence, but to do it with a great safety net underneath them. I am right there. But I'm not telling them how to cut everything. And if they ask me questions, does this look good? I'm like, well, you tied it. What do you think? And forcing them to get into those positions that they're going to be in as new graduates. We had two of our Encore doctors. Both, I was so blown away how bright these students were. One was a Penn grad, one was a Cornell grad. Both of them had been out for 3 years, and they were really struggling to spay a cat. Not that spaying a cat in 10 minutes is the standard in veterinary medicine, but they had all this knowledge in their hard drive, but they just weren't able to have the confidence to make that decision themselves. I think, and this may be going farther than you want to know, Brenda, but I think a lot of this is a leadership issue at the veterinary schools. Having a bunch of initials after your name, completing an internship, just like our good friend, our mutual friend Peter Weinstein says, high-paid technician. Nothing disparaging against technicians, of course, but it's been able to think on your feet, knowing that you can count on your education and being in an environment where there's a freedom to fail, but a safe place where you can fail.
Okay. I think that that's a great valid points, and I love that approach to helping them build their confidence. And I think that when we think about mentorship and training, we've got to take it beyond just the new grad conversation. We think about the number of staff members that are coming through our practices, and they need the mentorship as well. And what I
Oh yeah.
found when I was a hospital administrator was that if their trainer was assigned as also their mentor and trainer, it really just kind of defaulted to that training mode. And so I started separating them out, and they had a trainer who was very skilled and could teach the skills within their department or their role. But then I always made sure that I assigned a mentor from a different department completely. So that if I'm a CSR, I'm going to be paired up with a technician who's going to be my mentor. And their job was really to bring them into the practice from a cultural standpoint and to really make them feel comfortable and
Hmm.
check in with them and how they're doing. And I found that those newer employees were more likely to open up to their mentor about maybe specific things they were struggling with than they would have been with their trainer. And so I think that, that's one thing to think about in your own practices when you're thinking about training versus mentoring.
I think that's such a good point, Brenda. And I think like the cross role mentorship is really underutilized. Like you use the example of having a CSR be paired with a technician as their mentor. And I think that can happen across all the different roles in the clinic. And I also think, it's so easy for us also to default into the medical director or the practice owner to be the mentor for a new doctor. But you can imagine the hierarchy and power dynamic in that environment.
Mhm.
How psychologically safe of a space is it going to be if the person who pays your bills or writes your check is also your mentor? How comfortable are you going to be in sharing when you've maybe made a mistake or you feel very insecure about something? And I think for those of us, doctors, we know that some of our best mentors have been practice managers and technicians. And so it's good. I like that invitation to think about it, at the hospital level. How can we kind of mix up groups without defaulting into the more traditional roles that we are used to seeing?
Yeah, I
Such,
agree.
such
I
a great
love
point.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so easy when you're the subject matter expert. I'm a CVT and I'm a great CVT. It's really hard to stay in that mentorship space and not teach and train. And, that can be really difficult. I love the idea of cross-pollinating like that. That's awesome.
And you were, Dani, you were an associate when you had your experience as a mentor, correct? You weren't the practice owner.
No,
So,
I've actually never been a practice owner. I've always been very, very interested in ownership. I mean, one of the best things my mentor, who was also my first practice owner, taught me was opening up the books and showing me how the practice ran. So I've always been very interested in all of the business side of the practice, but never really, desired to own my own practice. This journey that I'm on with Ready Vet Go, being an entrepreneur now, was not something that I set out to do. That was 20 years in the making. And so, no, I haven't been an owner. The way Ready Vet Go came to be when I had a mentee a few years ago was because the place where I had worked for over a decade, the owner was getting ready to move on and was selling his practice. And while he had always been the point mentor, for me included, he didn't really want to take on that role anymore. He was enjoying this next phase of his life. And he said, we're bringing on a new grad, and we need somebody that's going to be more than just an informal mentor to her. And that's where he, kind of invited me to be in this role. And I realized that it was just something that I loved. So I was an associate at the practice, and she and I had a really amazing mentor-mentee relationship. And so you certainly don't have to be the practice owner or the medical director. And I don't know if this is off topic, but he compensated me financially. And I do recommend that we do that, because I think there's this idea in vet med that somehow because we were mentored, or maybe we weren't, but because we received mentorship early in our career, we're somehow obligated to give back to the next generation. And that isn't necessarily true today when so many of us aren't in a practice owner role. If I'm an associate doctor at a clinic and I'm taking time off the floor, maybe doing something that's going to get in the way of my own production goals or my own efficiency, that there ought to be compensation. So that's just my little side plug, since you asked me about that role.
I think that's a very important point and a very valid question. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have top of their mind. Melissa, from an HR perspective, what do you believe that should look like?
I think that's going to be unique in everybody's situation, and it depends on how much mentoring is needed, how much time is off the floor. But it's definitely worth a conversation to see if, if I'm dedicating 5 hours of my week to mentorship, that's 5 hours I'm not producing. So what does that look like for me?
Okay. So Tim, I'm going to throw the second burning question to you. You were so gracious. You provided us with a link to the AHA Guide to Mentorship, which we have in our podcast episode description below. So anybody can click on it and get access to that. But you've worked in busy practice for many, many years. So what does effective mentorship look like in a busy veterinary practice that doesn't have unlimited time or resources to do this?
Well, I'll start with two of Dani's points. One, we've established that mentoring is not training. It's beyond. It's the follow-on steps beyond the checklist. So that the checklist takes time, and so does the mentorship. And I do agree that there should be some compensation, particularly if it's an associate in today's market, where we're tracking production and associates are paid that way. I'm going to go to a higher level on this and say that it's really the practice leadership that establishes the culture. And I'm not disagreeing with Dani, but this profession has provided more for me than I ever imagined. And I do feel like there's something that we should give back, but we got to give it back the right way. And that is creating this culture with the techs, with the CSRs and assistants, and with the young doctors where we're making it better. I agree that just because it was hard for me learning how to do this stuff on my own without a mentor, or the doctors that I trained with at the University of Georgia, they stayed up late at night and they worked 80 hours a week. I'm tired of all that crap, and I don't think there's a place for it. It's about servant leadership. I'm going to get a little crazy on this one. I think the problem is in our whole veterinary education system. Back to Peter Weinstein's point, just because you've got initials after your name doesn't make you a leader. Those people are highly paid technicians, and they've gone through a process. I can't really blame individuals, but they've gone through a process since high school, many of them since middle school, when it's all been about getting that grade. It's all been about them. It's all been a narcissistic thing. And you can't change those habits from 16 to 18 years of education overnight. But if they get into a practice where it's about serving each other, servant leadership, instead of everybody's there to serve me, I'll just real briefly, we had a very bright associate in my practice, valedictorian of his class, and he just was a rock, and he struggled so hard in our practice because everything he thought about was about himself. How am I going to fix this case? What am I going to do this? And he had all these great resources in our practice, licensed technicians, experience, and he didn't really utilize that. And it was this kind of he didn't overtly do this, but his mindset was, well, I'm a DVM, I'm better. And it took a lot of lumps to get through that, to have him have the humility, which I think is the most important factor in a leader, probably in a mentor too, to have the humility to take this input from everybody else. Because what that set up was this culture of training each other and serving each other to make the industry better. Now, that might be a little higher level than you wanted, but it's more than just getting that checklist. It's having a place where it is okay to fail. Remember, these veterinary students, it's so competitive to get into veterinary school. They're all used to being A students. They're all used to being at the top of the class. And then when they get into vet school, that bar gets raised even higher. And they are so afraid of looking bad. They're so afraid of failing. There's the students that I teach in surgery at the spay neuter clinic. Oh, I jump all over them in a nice way whenever they say the word can't. I can't do this. I'm no good at this. Every time they say that, they've just convinced their brain that they're not good at it. So we eliminate that from their vocabulary right away. And we have a lot of fun when we do that, but it points out to them, that it is okay to not be good at something at first. And me as the mentor, I'm creating this environment for them to grow. I'm not going to put my hands in there and redo something unless it needs to be done. I'm going to make them redo it, and they're going to learn that way. And then, I had a student gave me a hug yesterday and said goodbye. She was leaving to go on to her next externship, and what I told her was, she was so thankful for the experience, and I said, "Oh, I don't want you to forget this feeling that you have right now. So 5 years from now, when you're a practice owner and you're a famous veterinarian, you got to remember this feeling, how great it was to have somebody let you do this, so you can do that for future veterinarians."
Absolutely. Absolutely. Melissa, you've worked in a lot of practices. How do what does effective mentorship look like in those busy practices that you've experienced when they don't have unlimited time or resources?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question because that's one you hear all the time. We're so busy. We're so busy. How do we train? How do we mentor? How do we find the time? And my answer is you have to find the time. You have to make it. That time is not going to magically appear. You're going to fill that time with other things. So you have to make it a priority. And you're either going to put the time in up front, so coaching, teaching, mentoring up front, or you're going to put it in on the back end through exits and turnover, burnout, and errors and mistakes that have to be cleaned up. So you're going to put in the time somewhere. So why not do it in a positive way and set it up from the beginning? But you have to schedule it. You have to schedule it. You have to make the time. You have to commit to that. Commit to that's important. And the return that it's going to bring to your practice and to that individual is so important that it's okay that they don't see appointments for an hour a week. Like that is important to us. And you have to commit to that. And set up that meeting. If you're going to do like a one-on-one mentorship, set that up once a week, and it's not when we have time, let's see what time we have this week. Set it up as a recurring and hold that sacred. If it's having the person be in surgery with you for half a day each week, they're in surgery with you for half a day each week. Like you have to hold that time sacred. There will always be something that feels urgent and more important that comes up. But if we allow those urgencies to overshadow this very important work of mentorship, we'll pay for it later on. We're going to put in the time one way or the other. I'd rather put it in on the front end.
Yeah, you got to break that cycle. I think that so many practices get it in their head that we're just too busy. We just need another person. They're not setting them or themselves up for success. And we've got to pivot and change what we're currently doing to get off of that hamster wheel, right?
Yeah.
Dani, what's been your experience?
Mhm.
Busy practices, they don't have unlimited resources. How do they get this done?
Just pivoting off what the others have said, I think the scheduling piece is imperative. Everybody has good intentions. We want to mentor, and when we say we want to mentor, we mean it. We're not being disingenuous. But life gets in the way, and clinics are very busy, so it needs to be scheduled. I agree. And then the clinic culture needs to support that, that we understand that this time is blocked off. And yes, Mrs. Smith wants to bring Fluffy in, but it's not an emergency, and that can wait because this is our important time. I also want to point out there are external resources. We cannot meet all of the needs of our teams all the time within the structures of our daily clinic. One, because it is just too busy. And another is, what I was sharing before, that sometimes that safe space to admit like our real mistakes or fears or concerns, there's just not a space to have that happen inside of the clinic. And so, external programs exist. I created Ready Vet Go specifically for that purpose, to help support veterinarians and their clinics with some of the non-clinical skills that, there's just not enough time to address during the day. And also we have this safe space outside of the clinic. Like our program, it's a peer group. It's mentor led, but it's a cohort based program. So everybody progresses through the program over the 7 months together. And what happens is all of these early career doctors get into a group together and they realize something magical, which is that the challenges that they're having, which they think might be unique to their practice, are actually pretty universal. And so we know that turnover is significantly decreased for people who have gone through our program. They are bonded to their practices, partly because a lot of these things are normalized, that this is just part of the challenge of being an early career doctor. And so I think it's kind of two parts. It's setting aside the structured time, having the whole clinic buy into it, and also utilizing the resources that exist outside of the practice to fill in those gaps. You can use that structured time, in the form of a mentorship agreement that's collaborative, that both parties, weigh into. And, like Melissa was saying, maybe it's an hour a week that we're meeting. Maybe check in after a couple of months of that. Does that frequency feel good? Do we want to meet less frequent now that you're getting a little bit more confident and comfortable? It's a living document that's collaborative from both parties. And so that document can be created, and combining something like that with something like Ready Vet Go or another external program to fill in some of those gaps can be a good way to meet those needs and to make sure that people are getting the mentorship that they need and that they're promised. And the ROI on all of that is, just like what we were saying. I mean, it's going to pay dividends because you can do all this work, but if they feel like they're not supported and they leave, then, well, that's too bad for everybody. That's very sad.
I love the beauty of the normalization piece that happens out of being part of a cohort and sharing experiences from different practices. I think that that's beautiful and worth so
Mhm.
much in terms of the retention that is going to happen afterwards. So thank you for providing that to our profession. I think a lot of practices could probably tap into that to supplement what they're doing in-house, right?
Yeah, you're welcome. And thanks for saying that. It's been, it's just been such a joy when I, get our survey data back at the end and I hear from practice leaders that retention is up. I mean, I always get a little bit teary because, I do love this profession so much and I want to make sure that we can help support our team members.
Dani, I was just interested in briefly. I know Brenda's got limited time here. Um, we haven't talked about the responsibility of the mentee, of what their expectations are, and I'd be interested to hear how that fits in with your program.
I totally did not prompt you on this at all. You and I actually have never even met. I love that you asked me this. So when I built Ready Vet Go, it was a 6 month
Right.
program with 6 modules, 6 workshops, 12 meetings. It is now 7. And the reason it's 7 is because after a year of doing the program, the feedback that I received from practice leadership was our mentees really don't know how to be mentees and they don't know how to take accountability of their mentorship journey. So I thought, okay, let me fix that. And so I looked around to see what existed and I found that the Western College of Veterinary Medicine in Saskatoon a number of years ago saw the same gap, and they were working with the Canadian VMA and they embedded into their curriculum a mentee skills training. And it was 4 years of curriculum embedded throughout the 4 years of veterinary school, basically to come up with another way to address the problem of turnover and mentor-mentee disconnect, because historically we've really focused on the mentor. Let's train the mentors, and that's great. But what about the mentees? So this program existed and I adapted it. And I actually, module 1 in our program is all dedicated to mentee skills, where we basically are empowering the early career doctors in our program to maximize their relationship with their in-clinic mentor. Because that's the mentorship relationship that is super important. We are with them for 7 months, but we're not with them all the time. And truthfully, the relationship they have on the ground with their mentor is the most important. So we talk about things like setting goals and self-directed learning and how to communicate with your mentor, how to have hard conversations. We teach how to identify what type of feedback we like to receive and to share that with the mentor. So there are so many things that can be really taught about mentee skills, and I don't think it's brought up enough. I'm so glad you asked that, Tim. I am editing a book for Wiley. It's actually coming out in September. It's called Mentorship in Veterinary Medicine, and we do have quite a bit about mentee skills and truthfully a lot of this other stuff that we've talked about in the last 30 minutes here. So I would love to know how you're addressing that with the students that come through. Maybe we need to do another come back with Brenda again, but I thank you for asking that question. It's something I'm very,
Yeah,
very
that's
passionate about.
that. Oh, well, that's God bless you. That's fantastic in your program that you've done that, because it's we all agree that the students, and this goes for technicians too. You know, when they all want to work in a practice with mentoring, and then when I ask them, well, what's mentoring? I kind of get the deer in the headlights look sometimes. So it's so true. And many of them, again, looking back to how their education, 16, 18 years of primarily didactic checklist stuff, they're waiting for us to plug in a USB port and download all of our knowledge. And they have to take an active role in their own career. So good. That's great stuff, Dani. Great stuff.
Yep.
Can't
Yep.
wait to see the book.
I know, me too. Believe me. It's been a long 20 authors and 2 years of work. I also cannot wait to see this book, Brenda.
Well, thank you all for flying with us on Flight Plan Quick Consults, and thanks to our generous sponsor, Purina, who's sponsoring today's episode. If today's insights helped you climb to new heights, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your crew. Until next time, keep your mission clear, your team aligned, and your practice soaring.